Have you ever wondered if your paddle is too heavy for you? Well, Coach Tony and I are going to explain how to figure that out.
CJ, it's a pleasure to be here on the Better Pickleball channel. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about swing weight of the paddle. And what we're going to do is show you how to figure out the swing weight of the paddle. You can do this at your next rec play, open play. CJ and I are at open play tonight, joining some folks here in Tampa. You can do this by yourself. If you want to know more about swing weight, get into the weeds a little more, we're going to link to a video up here that you can check out for that. And if you want to go crazy deep, there's a video down below on paddle selection.
So Coach Tony, how are we going to tell? How do we tell about swing weight?
All right, the easiest way to do this, and again, you can do this at your local rec center or when you're playing with friends, is you take your paddle in your hand and you're going to swing it. I'm going to hand it to Coach TJ in a second, but you're going to swing it from side to side. I want your arm to be nice and relaxed. So grab that paddle in your dominant hand, relax the arm, relax the hand, relax the arm, nice and relaxed, and start swinging it side to side. Your wrist should flex a little bit. If your wrist isn't flexing, that means you're holding it a little too tight. Relax it so that it kind of moves around like this. You don't want to flex it, right. You don't want to move your wrist like that, right. But it should be nice and relaxed. You want almost like the paddle's falling out of your hand. That's how you can feel it. Now feel that one. Okay. And go ahead and grab this one. Okay. And you'll see a big, difference in the weight of the paddle.
There's a big difference in the weight of the paddle.
All right.
Between the two.
So basically, you know, I brought out 3 paddles here, but you can do it with 2 paddles, 3 paddles. The idea is that you take the paddle, you hold it in your hand. Here, you can try this one too if you want. Hold this one, swing that one a little bit, and that one's gonna be kind of interesting. I'll show you why in a second. So swing it nice and relaxed. Relax the wrist a little more.
You got to watch that. You have to watch the tension, right? Because I noticed when I put that one in my hand, I automatically tighten the grip just a little bit, and I'm like, oh, okay. And then the minute I loosen it, right, so that I'm nice and relaxed, it feels different.
What happens if you tighten the grip on the paddle, it's going to feel lighter in that moment. But what you're trying to do is compare paddles, right? So you're trying to get a comparative weight. So you're done with that one, all right?
I'm done
Try
with
this
that
one now.
Well, this is easily the lightest. Right. Swing weight, lightest feeling.
It's the lightest swing of the paddle. What's interesting about that paddle is this paddle weighed in at 7.76 ounces, and am I going to get that one, Coach? This one weighed in at 7.83. So this one's a little bit heavier total weight on a scale. This one a little bit lighter total weight on a scale. This one's longer, which you'd expect to be a little bit heavier in terms of swing weight, yet it's the lighter one on swing weight. So if you want to learn more about swing weight, you can check out this video again, and the one we'll put down in the video description. But Coach, based on this decision, which of the 3 paddles would you be buying in terms of swing weight?
In terms of swing weight, I would be buying this one. The other 2 were just too heavy, and I think one of the things, certainly, my arms are smaller. Right. My forearms are smaller than your forearms, and for me to play for 2 or 3 hours at a time with a heavier paddle is going to take a toll on my body.
Yeah, I mean, these muscles are really small compared to the others, like our shoulder muscles or leg muscles are much bigger. These joints, these tendons, you got to take care of them. And what happens is we'll see players who are smaller than Coach TJ and myself, small players using heavy paddles, swing weight, and that'll really mess up your arm.
I think it also speaks a little bit to being able to move the paddle, right? I mean, to move the paddle from side to side and in terms of quicker reactions.
Correct, particularly if you're playing doubles, which I'm assuming that the vast majority of you are playing doubles. Doubles is a game of hand speed, right? Those bangers are coming at you and things like that. You got to get that paddle around. You want a lighter swing weight paddle. A heavier swing weight paddle will give you more power into the ball, but you sacrifice speed and potentially some arm injury.
Now, I know we're going to talk about it in more detail in the 2 videos that you described, and again, we're going to link to those here, but just want to make sure that we're talking about swing weight, not the static weight.
Absolutely. Static weight is what you see when you go to a manufacturer's website or you go to a pickleball site like Total Pickleball to buy your paddle. What you'll see is total weight, right? Which is 8 ounces, 7.8, 8.3, things like that. That's important information because it gives you the total weight of the paddle, but it doesn't necessarily tell you how the paddle swings. Some paddles are heavier on the top than the bottom, and that affects the swing weight of the paddle.
And that's what I was feeling when I was moving the paddles, across back and forth. Is I was feeling basically, is it head heavy? Where is the weight? And feeling it further away from my body.
And one way to think about it too is, as you swing the paddle through the air, think about it like, are you swinging it through air or are you swinging it through water? Right? You know, when you're in water, you move your arm, it's harder to move. If the paddle feels like you're pulling it through water more than another paddle, that paddle has a higher swing weight than the paddle that's easier to move through the air.
I like to think of the paddle as an extension of my arm, and it's important that the paddle works with my arm, not against my arm. That's why we put together a bunch of resources to help you pick the best paddle for your game. Not only to pick the best paddle, but how to optimize that paddle, such as using lead tape, where to put it,
Also, CJ, importantly, where not to put it. We also talk about overgrips and some other aspects of the paddle that really help you get the longevity that you want out of your pickleball paddle.
So make sure that you click the link down below in this video to get your free paddle resources. And we'll see you out on the pickleball courts.